Okay, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Is this okay? I would like to welcome, it's my great honor to welcome Caroline Sinders tonight here. They are an acclaimed critical designer, researcher, artist whose work sits at the intersection of technology, society, and human rights. So more closely, over the past decade, you have explored some of the most pressing issues around our digital age and technology, from artificial intelligence, harmful design, online harassment, the misinformation, and the politics of digital spaces. And you have explored this both through the lens of an artist as well through your professional practice. And perhaps before going deeper into your artistic practice, I'd like to talk to you shortly about your professional one.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's do it.
So you are the founder of Convocation Design and Research. It's an agency dedicated to leveraging design and AI for public good. Can you explain a little bit about this for us? Because, reading about your collaborations with organizations such as Amnesty International, United Nations, Wikimedia Foundation, IBM Watson, etc., it seems that you have really committed to addressing systemic inequities through both your research, activism, all the practices that you are engaged in. So can you describe a little bit about this, and perhaps give an example? What does a working day look like for you when you are working with AI or ML for the public good?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for that. Machine learning is one of the things we focus on. We focus on a variety of other domains and entities related to digital rights. So digital rights is the manifestation of human rights inside of technology. That's software and hardware, for example. And so we really take what we think of as a 360 view of that. That means we're often interfacing directly with marginalized or vulnerable populations who are facing different kinds of digital inequity. That could be, for example, we do a lot of spyware research. So spyware is varying forms of malware that kind of does what it sounds like. It's spying on your phone. Recently, here, for example, in the Western Balkans, former Yugoslavian nations, the Serbian government has placed spyware on a journalist's phone, and it's called Novi Spy, for example. But we'll often look at how spyware is built, how is it disseminated, and then how does it impact the person who's experiencing it. So we'll often start, let's say, with the victim of digital harm. Our initial goal is to just get them safe. So it's to sort of see how they're being impacted. How do we remove it or mitigate the harm? We also do this with, let's say, online harassment, technology-facilitated violence, and online gender-based violence. So our first goal is always the person impacted. They're always our focus. And how do we help them? In some cases, that means, if it's something that ends up being spyware or malware, they need to send us the device. We need to do digital forensics and a code audit, often to see, what is happening. If it's something let's say their information has been leaked online, so we call this doxing, the release of public documents. That would be your phone number, your address, your license, your passport number. These are things that are then used to heavily target that individual, receiving massive amounts of phone calls to their personal phone, or sometimes their workplace will be contacted where people will sort of make up really malicious lies about them. Our goal is to sort of get them to be safe. In those cases, often we're working with them to take down that information that's online, so to remove their personal information. So because we sort of really understand, let's say, the ins and outs of the software, we also engage in policy about the software. So we'll collaborate with much larger organizations like Amnesty International, like the Mozilla Foundation, like this really large US NGO called Fight for the Future, to try to pass regulation and push for regulation related to the specific areas we're working on. That also means that in some cases we're able to do technology, active technology research and building. So we'll sometimes work with tool builders that are building software to mitigate these harms or analyze these harms. We also then will often do user experience design, so the design of software. So this is what I mean when like we kind of take this 360 view, is we see all these things interacted, because when it comes to technology facilitated abuse, the design of the software and hardware really matters, how it's technically built, what it looks like to the user, what they see or don't see. Oftentimes we'll also work with or work against a software company. So either meeting with their policy and design teams to really advocate on behalf of our clients, the victims of these attacks, in terms of how they can strengthen their code base, their software, or how just like they could build better tools. So thinking about design that could help mitigate or potentially sort of remove the harm. But this also involves like a really deep analysis, right, from the perspective of the victim of how that information, like how the harm is able to pass to them. So that's probably a good way to think about it. But I mean, we also, AI is a part of harm, and that's also the way in which we look at it.
Okay. You mentioned also tackling the regulations and the legal aspects of it. How do you do it, since this is such a area that is vaguely regulated, and also there is a very big difference between the regulation within different countries, and now it's like a global thing, we are all connected?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I mean, I've been really lucky in the sense of how I've been able to design my human rights career. So I spent 2 years at a regulator as a postdoctoral fellow at the UK's Data Protection and Privacy Regulator, the Information Commissioner's Office. So I've worked with a privacy regulator. I have an inside knowledge in terms of how that works, but it also means I know, like inside of the EU, some of the different privacy regulators. But I'm also a part of other consortiums. So we work very closely with a Dutch NGO called Bits of Freedom. They're a privacy-focused NGO. They're a part of a group called EDRI, which is a European Digital Rights Initiative. And so that is a variety of non-governmental organizations and civil society organizations that partner with lawyers. And they're often filing legal complaints with the European Commission. So that will be like, let's say the current EU AI Act inside of the EU, right? The Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act. So in those cases, we're collaborating either on active investigations, on co-writing complaints, or a variety of other things. So we're trying to also use the legal apparatus that's available to us. In a lot of cases, I've also found that just like sometimes emailing specific team members of different regulators to share information ahead of time can be really helpful. So I often do a lot of what one could think of as advocacy, where I'm just sort of presenting the work and meeting with different folks to try to ensure wider spread impact of the different projects we're working on. But also like, it's weird, once you sort of hit a certain level, let's say, of notoriety, those elected officials will sometimes come to you. So this happens to me in a US context where I'll meet with different staff members of senators or congressional reps inside of the United States and sort of brief their team on, let's say, like specific projects or specific focus areas that I'm like working on. So some of it is just sort of knowing what the levers are available to you and knowing when and how to press them.
We are witnessing today a situation where after the inauguration of Donald Trump, not very much later after that, the
he's only been in
tech
office 3 months.
Yeah. Decided to like step down, start deregulating and started like deconstructing a lot of work that has been done in this terms of like reducing harm, focusing on social networks that have been such a source of extremely polarizing, galvanizing discussions that are basically distorting the social tissue as well.
Yeah.
So how do you see this rolling out in the future?
I mean, that's such a really great and also nuanced question. It's going to roll out differently in different places, right? So in the UK, we have something called the Online Safety Bill, which I like and really dislike parts of it because it was trying to attack encryption, which is primarily just fucking stupid. But it's also, it has created and placed very specific constraints on social media platforms in terms of an expectation of how quickly they need to respond to specific types of harm. It's sort of furthered the rights of children of being online. So in the UK, we have something called the Children's Code. It outlines like how content is allowed to be presented to them in terms to preserve their privacy. And so it's established like for different ages how you would present information to them. And the online safety bill in the UK also sort of taking that forward a little bit more, but it also is obviously focusing on adults. So it's giving specific stipulations to very large online platforms, which are social networks, right, of like how they need to respond to content, different kinds of transparency that they're held to. But we also see that again with the EU, or we have the EU AI Act and we have the Digital Services Act. So inside of the Digital Services Act, which extends to all EU members, including Croatia, there is specific information around there having to be alternatives to things called recommendation algorithms, right? So recommendation algorithm is your feed on Facebook. All very large online platforms, or VLOPs, which are what social networks are housed under and defined as, and this also includes Wikimedia, have to provide a non-profiling option. This is actually one of the complaints I'm actively working on right now with Edgery.
Can you explain a little bit what does it mean?
Yeah, I will for sure. So this is one of the complaints we've recently authored that I led the design investigation on. So what that means is that when you open up something like Facebook, you should very easily be able to find a non-profiling feed. For Facebook itself and Instagram has interpreted that as a chronological feed, but there are many ways to think about what a non-profiling feed could look like. I think that that's such like a juicy design and research project to visualize and think about. But they have interpreted that as a chronological feed, which is not wrong. What makes it, so what is interesting about the case we're working on is also inside the Digital Services Act, there's an article that covers dark patterns, which are harmful design patterns, which are design patterns that can manipulate or confuse consumers into making decisions they normally wouldn't like. And that's one of the big like legal areas I focus on as a designer, where I often provide direct evidence to investigations, like legal and regulatory investigations. So there is a non-profiling option for all of us. You could all access it now. It's just hidden under something called feeds. And to get to it, there's a few different steps, and you can't set it as your default feed. But on LinkedIn, you can. And it's the same thing with like Twitter and Instagram. So we're filing a complaint very soon. I think we're gonna file it in Ireland for a variety of reasons. To sort of say that like this is like doubly violating the DSA because it's a harmful design pattern, which is an article within the DSA, and it's not really embodying the recommendation algorithm article because it's so difficult actually to access these because it's a dark pattern. And so the point of this is to say that like Facebook is rolling back a lot of things, but they can't really cut an EU or UK sized hole in their product. And so they can try to build like regulatory walled gardens. That's very hard to do. So I, perhaps naively, but I maintain hope that there will be like more and more regulation coming out of the European Union. And that will sort of force other countries like the United Kingdom also to like up regulation. And the reason I'm hopeful of that is we've seen so much regulation passed in the past, let's say like decade. We have GDPR, which UK's is nearly identical to the EU's. We've had the online safety bill in the UK. We're probably going to have forthcoming AI regulation related to copyright. In the EU, we've had GDPR, the EU AI Act, the Digital Markets Act, and the DSA. That's 4 really large pieces of widespread regulation in under a decade. So there's no reason that there shouldn't be more. But also, the EU is currently doing a lot of specific research on how social media like negatively impacts children through the lens of addiction and anxiety. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like an online safety bill here in the EU. And these are all things that Facebook and Twitter, I'll never call it X, and LinkedIn, all these other platforms, if you want to exist in the EU, you have to follow these regulations. And this is where I'm really proud to be collaborating. We're not a member of EDRI because we're not legally registered in the EU. Hopefully that will change in the next few years for my company to become a nonprofit inside of the EU as an EU, like in one of the member states. But this is where, you know, being a part of these consortiums who not only take this regulation very seriously, are willing to file so many complaints on behalf of individuals, are really willing to do this investigatory work to ensure that the law is followed and it's followed in a way that creates equity. You know, I am seeing it, at least in the circle I'm in.
That is comforting to hear. To go back a little bit on a topic that we tackled, that we 5 minutes after meeting each other, basically, is also AI related, and it's the topic of ethical topic of bias, the ethical challenge of fairness, ethical bias and fairness, and basically it comes down to AI and machine learning often perpetuates existing biases in training data. And you work a lot with training the machines, machine learning. Can you give us some plastic example of how this works today in the AI models around us, the one that we kind of use without knowing what's inside of the black box?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so one of the I think the easiest ways to kind of grok, pun intended, if you will, AI is it's built by humans, and we all have varying levels of our own bias. A lot of data sets are also assembled by humans. A lot of those data sets are then cleaned and like reassembled also by people. And so, you know, because humans have bias, a lot of the things we like touch will also have bias. Another way to think of bias is like context or a lack of context. So, you know, earlier when we were speaking, one of the examples I give is I sometimes use AI transcription tools like Otter AI when I'm like in a meeting and we don't have someone to take notes. And you know, one of the examples we talked about is it will never learn my husband's name, which is Stjepan, and it's never going to learn one of my collaborators' names, who's Serbian, named Bojana. And there's like nothing I can do to like fix or change that, right? And so, you know, Otter AI is probably made in the US. I should look up where it's from. And, you know, it's probably using a series of audio transcription models that are either proprietary ones they own or things that they've gained access to or have come out of like a US university, right? And so, you know, as you start to sort of peel back the layers of what made the model, in a lot of cases, let's go with computer vision, those models are made from like videos that people aren't aware are taken at like train stations, or at universities, and so you're dealing with then like hyper specific films and videos. So Adam Harvey, who's another artist who works a lot in AI, has done a lot of investigation into where do computer vision models come from. One like really large data set that comes, I forget which model it feeds into, comes from a train station in Sweden. So like what is the demographic makeup of people in Sweden? It's a lot of Swedes. And not a lot of, let's say, like racially diverse folks. Computer vision models, as sort of illustrated in this really landmark paper done by Timnit Gebru and Joy Bulami, called Gender Shades, found that a lot of computer vision models have a difficult time recognizing different races and different genders. And they have the easiest time recognizing white male people. And this is most likely due to, you know, the training data that was used to generate the model. And so, you know, you can think of, let's say, like the data as these sort of main ingredients of like the flavor of the model. So if it's, let's say, like, you know, imagine if we made a data set of all the visitors that came to Druga More and then said that that was like a video data set for computer vision that matched all of Europe. Would that be accurate? Or would that reflect, would that reflect all of the different people that live in Europe? Probably not, right? Because it's one place in one city in one country, right?
So where does the factor of the human, entity that is correcting the process enter?
I mean, I think the reason we can say that like there's a lot of bias in it is I imagine that some of the people working on the model were like, you know, if it's done in an academic context, it can be good enough. You aren't intending it to be used by everyone, right? And so I think some of the issues that arise are, what is the model used for? So I have a data set that is installed today here that has been used to train an AI model, but it's a data set of cypress trees. And so if someone was like, this is environmental data, and we can use it for all environments, I would be like, well, no, the point is that it created an AI GAN, a general adversarial neural network, an AI video about cypress trees, right? So like I've created a hyper-curated, very specialized data set with my collaborator, Ana Labudović, on that project. And so I think sometimes what happens is folks are using available data sets that they can find that are either under open source licenses or have been like shared in an academic context, and then they're using it outside of its context, right? And I think that's also a major issue. A lot of text message prediction comes from this, or a lot of like text models for AI come from this canonical data set that is the Enron emails. So Enron was a corporation in the United States. It went bankrupt. It's very interesting. You should all watch a documentary about it. I actually went to high school in the same town where Enron was when it was breaking apart. But one of the reasons that those emails are used in machine learning data sets is in the court case, all the emails had to be shared. And since it was shared in the court case, it was actually accessible. You could go and like file a request for the legal documents. And so then suddenly all these different machine learning academics were like, we have real people's emails, right? And because often what you're looking for is like real data. So I could try to make a data set of what emails sound like, but because I'm trying to make a data set about emails, it might not sound natural or organic, or it's just my voice. So they had thousands and thousands of text, like real conversations available to them. And that has sort of become the backbone, or at least a few years ago, like over a decade ago, that's a lot of how like natural language processing models were analyzing text was through, like this was one of the big data sets people used. But this is emails for one company in one city, Houston, Texas, right? A specific demographic of people. Again, that's not representative of how all conversations sound like. So again, this is sort of how a lot of the bias also comes in.
Since you've already mentioned the work you have installed there,
Yeah.
I think this is a good opportunity to segue into your exhibition.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, as we heard from like this part of the conversation, you are very much entrenched in the the optics of viewing through technology, through society, through a lot of processes that we are going through, such as climate change, etc. And for example, the work that you talked about, it's cypress trees, the photo project that you have done it together with Ana Labudović, and it was a project supported by Ars Electronica, and you have done it through the years of COVID. Can you give us an introduction about that?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So yeah, Cypress Trees, A Beginning is the name of the entire project. So it's a 3,000 image data set that we shot in Louisiana during COVID. So I was traveling back and forth. Anna wasn't able to travel at the time. And the inspiration really came from Anna and I being very interested in the more human side of data and data sets. But also really thinking about the wider spread impacts of machine learning. So we were thinking a lot about how, as an artistic medium, because that's how we use AI, what impacts does our work have on the environment? Anna does a lot of really beautiful work already with the natural environment. She does a lot of work related to flowers. And so we were thinking about, what are like iconic structures. The cypress trees, especially across the American South, are quite iconic. They make up swampland, and that stretches from Texas to Louisiana to Mississippi to Alabama and parts of Florida. And they have a very particular shape, the bald cypress tree, which is in the United States. And they have these like knobby knees that sort of grow out of the ground. No one really knows, or they grow out of the water. No one really knows why. They might.
And they can be very, very old.
And they can be very old. They can be like thousands of years old. And they can also grow very, very large. A lot of those trees have been cut down over the years because they are very good at absorbing and repelling water. So they're often used to build houses across the Gulf Coast, because that's also where hurricanes hit and where we have like a lot of water. It's a very tropical area. This is the area that I'm from. So we get a lot of rain, a lot of flooding. But yeah, the bald cypress trees also make a natural barrier for hurricane protection, and they're currently threatened right now. So they're not endangered, but they're on the threatened list. And they're starting to die partially due to climate change and then human intervention. So enlarging like the Mississippi River to allow for like large container ships. This brings in more salt water, which kills the trees. Dredging and creating oil infrastructure is also doing that as well. It's damaging the trees. And so we sort of started this project really thinking about also like the cypress as a metaphor. It can be a meaning of death and rebirth in mythology. Anna has family from Georgia, and so that's also, there are swamps there, and so we were really sort of taken with this idea. And then when we finished documenting the trees, this large hurricane came through called Hurricane Ida and actually hit every location we had photographed. And so we originally were going to make a video that was a simulation about what this area would look like impacted by climate change. Because Louisiana is right on the water, it will very much be impacted by climate change, like any coastal city. But we ended up making a video sort of about the impacts of Hurricane Ida. So
because you had actual data.
Yeah, we had because all these areas had been hit. And so then the data set also became a poetic, almost like a form of poetic memory, because some of those trees obviously don't exist now, but we have these images of them.
So growing up in this type of an environment, I think definitely could have set the tone a bit for your work. Growing up in a place that has been marked by hurricanes, extreme weather. Tell us a little bit. I mean, you grounded your work in a bit of a source that is more private, that is more intimate to you, but you still involve the technology and all the research, an immense amount of research and diverse work in it. And also, it feels like the works are connected to each other, either through this red thread that goes through your intimate line of thinking about this work, but also the research and sometimes even physically. You showed me yesterday that basically one of the pieces is in proximity to the video essay.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So while doing the cypress trees project, so Louisiana is littered, I guess, dotted with so many oil refineries, and they're very close to cities, very similar to here, to Rijeka. In our bayous and swamps, and also in the shallow part of the Gulf of Mexico, so really close to land, are a lot of oil rigs. And so these are things, when you've grown up in Louisiana, you just know what they look like. Like when you fly into New Orleans, you pass over so many oil refineries and petroleum services plants. Like you just fly right over them. And then where I live in New Orleans, I'm about a 10-minute drive from a really massive petroleum plant. And you're not really allowed to visit these places, but you can visit them by water. So you can photograph them by water. You can kind of drive close and stand in a field and photograph them, but you're not really allowed to go inside. And as a kid, I always thought that they were really pretty because they have all these lights on them. They're lit up like a Christmas tree to a child. And then they have these pretty white clouds that come out of the refinery. And then you're like, oh my God, that's poisonous smoke as an adult.
So that's the point where you start seeing the infrastructure as something, as a subject?
Yeah, so like, as a child, you're like, it's so pretty. And then as an adult, you're like, oh my God, this is so violent. This is so bad. But for the cypress trees, a lot, like just out of frame in the blue panel is a really large refinery. And in one of the photos that's not in there, but it was my Zoom background for a while, there was fire coming out of the top of the refinery. They were clearly like burning excess chemicals or something. And I've been trying to do a project where I've been, which is not in this show, but I've like taken a boat down half of the Mississippi through an area called Cancer Alley. And it's where all of these refineries sit. And there's high rates of cancer in Louisiana, in those cities, right next to those refineries. So I've been trying to photograph the smoke. I want to make kind of like a video sculpture out of this like danger. But when I was doing the cypress trees, I kept going past all the rigs you see in the show here. And so at a certain point, I asked the boat captain, I was like, can we like not photograph cypress trees today, but can we go to these other things? And then that kind of started the project where I just started photographing them again and again and again. And I wasn't sure at the time what I was going to do with them. But I really started then thinking about, well, like, what happens to these rigs when they're decommissioned? They stay there. It's the same with the refineries. They just stay there. And I was like, well, who maintains them? Nobody maintains them. So you'll see in the show, one of the pieces, it looks like there's water on the ground. That's water and oil from this decommissioned rig. It's just like slowly leaking.
We have something similar here in Rijeka.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a part of your tour, but...
Not yet. Hopefully next time. But this project, when I was sort of researching it, was how I was introduced to Davor and Drugomore. I already knew about Drugomore, but yeah, this interest in what happens to refineries and rigs is what started the conversation.
And then you climbed into the wreck.
Yeah. And I've like climbed it, and you're not really supposed to.
Before climbing into the literal wreck, I would like to comment on the video essay.
Yeah.
Another one that has the topic of the tree.
Oh yeah, the lemon trees.
The lemon trees. So it is a short video essay. It reflects on energy production and climate change in your native region. I don't want to spoil the work by hitting the punchline, but I'm just a little bit scared, one, that maybe people are not going to catch it, or second, if I got it wrong.
Yeah.
So let's just check with the terminology, because offsetting, you use it as a term, and it has, I suppose, a dual purpose. One of the purposes is to explain the counterbalancing of the issues, because you plant a lemon tree and then on the other side you have all this heavy industry, and this is one attempt to try to counterbalance it. But the other way, and this is a metaphorical way, but the other way can also be like quite literal in terms of growing plants, right? So offset is a biological also term describing a natural process of propagation or asexual reproduction when a new plant arises next to its parent plant. Was this something that you were playing with?
Not totally the second part, but now I want to incorporate that.
Okay.
It was, this was a project, and so I was commissioned by the Art Institute of Chicago to make something about data. And I was really interested in making, I guess, a very like circular or referential piece. I made this video at a time where it seemed like everyone was making NFTs, and to me, NFTs were like taking oil and just like lighting it on fire and being like, that's my art. It's not that I'm like opposed to NFTs, but it's very similar to AI, and I grapple with this a lot, is so energy intensive, right? And so when I started my career as a photographer, I did analog photography, and you literally pour chemicals down a drain. You're really sort of grappling with, you know, the environmental cost of your art. And so I do think about that a lot, even as a digital artist. Like, what is the cost of my art? Is it worth it? So Anna and I have made an NFT. We raised $11,000 and we donated it to Hurricane Ida victims. It was the Cypress Trees Project. But anyway, the time I was commissioned for this project, I was still thinking about like how many people were engaging with this. Is this sustainable for artists in the sense of like, will these be financially sustainable for artists, or are we like locked into a system not designed for us? Is it environmentally sustainable? Can every artist really do this? Like, what would happen if every artist made an NFT of every art piece? And so I thought, well, let's say I'm gonna make an NFT, I want to offset it before I like put it online. And so that was the start of the Lemon Trees Against the Anthropocene, was really thinking about, okay, I'm gonna make a video. It should be easy, famous last words, for me to measure the energy of like the camera, because it's a digital device. And if I can see the battery, why can't I see like more information about the battery usage? It was really hard to figure that out. It's a Canon camera, probably for a lot of proprietary reasons. I also thought, like, with my computer, there's an energy monitor. Is there a way for me to like scrape or gather the energy? I'm not a great coder, so that was also very hard. So it just sort of seemed that every time I was trying to have actual hard quantitative data about energy usage, either proprietary designs of the software would stand in my way, or a lot of tools that people were selling around carbon calculators were actually not gathering everything. Like, they would gather how much you ate or like your travel carbon footprint, but not your life, let's say. And so I was thinking about all this also, like, where does the energy in Louisiana that I use come from? And what are the varying forms of energy? And obviously being surrounded by refineries, I was like, it's coming probably from that. And so then that led to me sort of documenting and thinking about this. And part of the project is like an exercise in futility. Like, it's really, like, you can't actually offset everything you do. Like, you would need a large plot of land, right? And many, many trees. And the reason I also chose trees is that that is where a lot of carbon offsets go, is like there are like carbon offset forests. But it's also very unclear like what that means. Like, is there a tree for you? Like, can you visit it? Where do these carbon credits come from? All of those are also wrapped in a metaphorical black box as well. And so the kind of the point of that project is also like really ruminating on both how difficult it is to like measure something that in an age of surveillance capitalism, when everything is tracked and caught, like, why can't I access that data? And then two, kind of the impossibility of offsetting this. And then just also the beauty of these like two little lemon trees, like trying to help me achieve this really small goal. And what does that goal even mean when I live like 10 minutes away from an oil refinery?
I think we just have a little bit more time left to shortly explain or give a trailer.
Yeah.
For the other video essay that is more AI generated.
Yeah.
And to discuss a little bit about the aesthetics of it and also the process that went into making it.
Yeah, sure. So that's the Rig 01. That's the other video. It's really only the last like 10 seconds that are AI generated. But it's a mix of like actual video I've taken of one of the decommissioned rigs that I've climbed on, which you're not legally supposed to do in Louisiana. And then like in Blender, building these 3D models around also like the rig. And so the story is that the narrator, who's voiced by me, has sort of overtaken this rig in the future to live on. That like Louisiana has kind of lost the climate change race, and that there's not a lot of safe places to live anymore, and that these rigs, which are designed to survive things like hurricanes and still stand, that people have now started to move onto them.
To gentrify them.
To gentrify them, yeah. You can't gentrify an oil rig, especially one nobody wants.
You should make a sticker out of that.
I really should. And so it's kind of about that. And it's also just reflecting on the fact that a lot of these rigs were built by companies on like land they rent from the state, but that other companies can use them. But that like someone decided to build it. Like someone set about making the design, like someone, you know, ordered all the nuts and bolts for it, right? So there was like care in a way that went into building these things, and there's no care from those companies in maintaining them. Again, a lot of these rigs leak, and they leak, you know, crude, or they leak unrefined oil out into the water. But also like what happens to them. And so I've been doing a little bit of research, and I'm currently applying for grants to sort of turn the rig into more chapters, like two to three more chapters. But I'm doing a lot of this research in what I'm calling sort of industrial archaeology, and sort of what does happen to rigs and refineries when they're closed. Like what are the proposals? In some places like California, people are like, oh, the rigs can turn into coastal reefs. Well, that's not gonna happen in Louisiana. So like, what do they become in 50 years? What are they gonna look like?
Thank you for that. Does anyone have a question maybe from the audience? Or we can also conclude with having a short break and then opening the exhibition and then having the artist at disposal for maybe direct questions. Okay, thank you, Caroline, very much.
Thank you.